Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 6th Invitational 2024's group stage, doing a bit of a recap, and we'll look at the individual matches in a moment here, but for now let's just take a quick look at the groups themselves, Group A, B, C, and D. This is how they turned out in case you missed part of it or all of it or whatever, or are looking back in on this from the future and you just want to remember. G2 and Sonics not only went flawless in terms of series, but also in terms of maps. Neither of them dropped a map. Probably you'd say Group A was a little bit more competitive than Group D, so Sonic's a bit more to prove. G2, I think, are probably looking like the best team in the tournament at the moment. G2 and Virtus Pro, both European teams, SSG and Sonics, both North American teams, so no Brazilian team topped any of the groups, despite there being 5 of them, and this year being dominated by Brazilian teams. The top 8s and the grand finals of the events, just being filled with them. The most recent event having 2 Brazilian teams in the grand final, the last 2 majors being won by W7M specifically. Yeah, just a year of Brazilian dominance, but none of them managed to make first place, but still they all made it into the top 3 at 2nd or 3rd, so that's still good enough to put them into the upper bracket. Speaking of the bracket, I'm waiting on them to announce the pairings for the bracket, so at some point I'll maybe post a picture of this, maybe I'll splice it in, maybe it'll be in the comments or the description, whatever. You'll find it somewhere, but I'm just waiting for them to announce that. And I'll talk about my predictions really quickly relative to what happened. So I got this group correct, except for I had FearX and GK switch, so pretty close there. I got this group right, except for I had SSG and FaZe switch. And Group C, I think, was the one I got the most wrong. I had M80 in 2nd. I thought this was gonna finally be their event, but no, I guess never bet on M80. I had Virtus Pro in 4th, so yeah, very, very wrong for this group, but I had W7M in 1st, Liquid in 3rd, so I did get that right, I guess, and I had Bleed in 5th, so pretty mixed up. I got that one kind of wrong. And then Group D, I did have Sonics in 1st, I had Los in 2nd, Fury in 4th, Falcons in 3rd. To be fair, Falcons did have substitutes for their first match, several of them, and then Joker never got to play. So I probably would have predicted them a little bit different had I known those facts. Probably I would have even put them in last, but I don't think I would have had them in 3rd. I think a lot of people had Fury or Scars as the team being eliminated, and it was Scars that did end up being eliminated. So I got this position right. I got 1st and last right, and then the middle, I got a little bit mixed up, but pretty close. I guess Group A and B I did pretty well, and then Group C especially poorly, and then D, close-ish, I guess. Okay, let's go look at the matches, and I'm actually gonna zoom in a little bit here, make this look a little bit better. Okay, so we'll go down the line. We'll start with Group A, G2 versus NiP. G2, flawless group stage, I mentioned on series and maps, but they also didn't get pushed to overtime on any of the maps, so they won, I think, between 7-2 and 7-5 on all of their maps. NiP were looking pretty bad in their first 2 matches, but they did have to play against G2 and Dark Zero, who ended up being, by far the best 2 teams in the group at the end of things. And they did pretty well, still talking about NiP here, against FearX and GK. So a little bit of a bounce back. They just got off to a little bit of a rough start. Dark Zero versus GK. I'm going to mention this for Sonics later, and I guess whatever, we'll talk about that when I get to it. But Dark Zero, they got off to a little bit of a rocky start, not super rocky. They win their first map, lose the second one, and then handily win the third, but they do lose a point by getting taken to map 3 by GK, who ended up being pretty bad in the event. I think a lot of people are pointing some fingers at their decision to not retain leader after their performance in Atlanta, where they made top 8, where they took 2 maps off of W7M, and now they get eliminated in the group stage here. They lose to the likes of FearX. They get outperformed by Falcons, their sort of regional rival, who they've seemed to eclipse recently, but obviously as of this result, not any longer, or at least not for the time being. So we'll see there. But back to Dark Zero, yeah, they do bounce back, and I'll just spoil this a little bit. They beat NiP 2-0, no overtime. They beat FearX 2-0, 1 overtime, I guess. This one was a little bit scary because I believe Dark Zero was the one that had to push overtime. But all this to say that I think they just needed that first map to really integrate Nath and Bolo into the roster. Bolo's still been a little bit lukewarm. There is more time for him to come into his own on this roster in this tournament, but Nath seems to be fitting into the roster pretty well, as I think a lot of people expected him to do. He's really proven himself on that M&M roster to be a very solid player. And I guess we'll resume here. Yeah, G2 takes down FearX without much sweat. Yeah, G2 just smokes 7-2, 7-4, 7-3, 7-5. FearX gets 7-5, 7-3'd here. Did I show this one? I think I did. Okay, continuing down, G2 versus GK, another not close one, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds. G2 might lose per map, but not any more than that. And then we have NIP versus GK. NIP does lose the first map, but then they smoke them on the next two. And Dark Zero, I showed this one already, but yeah, 7-1. We do end up seeing a couple of 7-0s in the group stage, and here's actually one of them. FearX 7-0s GK on Oregon, bit of an embarrassing one, and then they get taken down on Skyscraper. They lose 2-0, no overtime, no anything, get eliminated from the tournament pretty unceremoniously to the team that I think most people thought was going to be like the worst team in the event. Rin was pretty bad for a lot of it, their new pickup who used to play on D+, but came alive a little bit at the end there. And G2 take down Dark Zero 7-5, 7-5. So the most G2 have had to sweat, but again, they didn't get taken to overtime or anything. Almost they did at the very end, but Uno managed to clutch that last round 1v3 even after I think a botched C4. So good showing by him, good showing by G2 overall, really looking like the best team in the event. In Group B, Space Station versus Wolves kicks us off. Space Station, this was I think one of the first two matches because they had the two streams going on at the same time. First one I was watching, because of course it's an SSG game. SSG got like 4 rounds in a row. They went up pretty heavily in the first half, but we came to expect that because defense has been so favored in this event. It's actually ridiculous. Probably the most defender-sided meta we've ever seen in this game, and that's especially big of a point because just historically this has been a defender-sided game just by nature of the game. But yeah, I mean, something has to change. The frag grenade thing really pushed things over the line, in addition to Tubarao and Valkyrie and Azami and Solus and Fenrir, right? Just a lot of ridiculous defenders. So we'll see what Ubisoft does balance-wise, but I don't know why they've let so many of these operators be so ridiculous for so long, but okay, that's a little bit of a tangent there. FaZe takes down Damwon, or D+, I guess is their more official name, pretty handily. They only get 5 rounds, D+ does, and they've been pretty abysmal. Their last 2 years have been like really bad. They had a good showing at some majors in, what was it, like 2021 or something, and then at SI 2022 they were looking pretty promising. A lot of people even predict them to make it all the way to the grand final based on their group stage performance. They topped their group, and then they lost to Sonics 2-1 or 1-2, I guess, and then they lost, I think it was to Oxygen 0-2. So they, just in terms of maps, starting at SI 2022 playoffs, they went 1-4. In Berlin, they went 1-5. Those were best of ones in groups, so I guess they had one series win. In Copenhagen, they went 1-4 on maps. Atlanta, they went 1-4 on maps. And here at SI 2024, they went 0-8 on maps. So in the last like 2 years of play, they are 3-21, I think. Just absolutely terrible. One of the worst international streaks we've ever seen, probably. And I mean, to be fair, lots of teams would have done worse, I'm sure, if they'd qualified. They didn't, and so these guys are here. But you know, very brutal stuff. Also, during, I think it was this game here, SSG versus D+, the org posted on Twitter a recruitment post. They're like, if you want to play for D+, you know, tweet at us or whatever. It was pretty funny, and a lot of people thought it was in bad taste, and probably what happened was whoever posted that didn't even realize they were playing at the time or something, but who knows, maybe it was in bad faith. So yeah, we kick it off with this game, and then we had this one. Moving on to here, SSG take down FaZe, and this one really had big implications because SSG lost to Wolves, but they got the 1 point, and FaZe were the sort of the favorite to top the group. So maybe we end up with a little bit of a triangle, and actually we do, because FaZe take down Wolves, which ends up benefiting SSG because they got the 1 point in their matchup where they lost, whereas FaZe and Wolves end up not getting a point in that triangle of matches. So benefits SSG at the end there, and Wolves take down Bliss. Bliss, almost all of their maps are really close. 7-5, 8-6, and they do lose most of them, but still they're close. 7-5, 8-6 again, exact same scorelines, funnily enough. Bliss had players in 1v1s a lot, and they lost a lot of them, which is pretty sad. And because the games were so close, obviously those were very impactful losses. Maybe it would have turned them into wins had they won. Some pretty close maps here. I guess the 7-4 is a little bit less close, but still an 8-7, a 7-5, and then finally they get a win, and it's not close as 7-3, but then round 15, eliminating D+. I got a little bit ahead of myself, but I'm trying to talk about each team at the same time. So what did we not show? Wolves take down D+ pretty handily. We showed this, of course, and this. SSG also take down D+ pretty handily. And show these two really quickly, yeah. FaZe versus Wolves was very close, 8-6, 7-5, as we saw in one or two of the other games, but yeah, FaZe do take it down at the end and manage to push themselves all the way up to, push Wolves from first to third. Had they pushed it to 3 maps, had Wolves done that, they still would have been second place, and if they'd won, they would have secured first. They were in first at the beginning of this, but second versus third, not the end of the world by any means. It puts you in the same position. It just means that you get, the second place people in the groups get to pick if they want to play against you. And depending on some other factors, but whatever. I guess we'll see that again whenever the bracket gets released. So yeah, Wolves still top 3. Can't complain too much about that. And we'll move on to Group C, the purported group of death, and I think evidently so. The top 4 standings were all pretty close. M80 not close. They got smoked. Oh well. Oh, I did also want to say D+. They went -30 on round count. That's pretty bad. Okay, Virtus Pro topping the group on a tie, +12, but they had the head-to-head. I'm not sure which one was actually the deciding factor. I saw people saying round count was it, and some people saying that head-to-head was the deciding factor, so I'm not 100% sure. I think some people might have looked at the tiebreak for mini leagues and got a little bit confused there, so I'm not sure. I'm not going to actually say which one it was or not. You can comment below if you did 100% know which one it was. Looking at the matches, Virtus Pro start out with a loss despite, well, they don't lose another one. They win their next 3 series, and it's a close-ish series, but none of the maps were particularly close, so I guess Liquid only won 3 more rounds than Virtus Pro, but yeah, they do walk away with 3 out of the 4 points. W7M versus M80, a close 2-0. I mean, just about as close as a 2-0 can get, 8-7, 8-6. Who knows, had M80 been able to play against any other team in their first match besides the best team in the world, maybe that would have been better for their mental, and maybe they would have got off to maybe they would have had a better group stage, who knows. And they didn't, and they get eliminated, but fighting W7M in your first match is a tough one. Virtus Pro versus M80, they take him down pretty handily in the first map, then a close second map, but still no points for M80 still. W7M versus Bleed. Bleed do make them bleed a little bit. They take a map off them, and they lose the other 2. So there's 1 point away from W7M. They got the full 4, of course, versus M80. And then W7M versus Virtus Pro. This is where things really get flipped. W7M wins that close skyscraper game, but then a pretty handy win on Cafe for Virtus Pro, and then a close border. They get 3 of the 4 points against W7M, and that really ends up allowing them to take first place in the group. But we weren't there just yet. Liquid versus Bleed. Bleed lose the first map, but they win the next 2, so good on them, taking down Liquid, who a lot of people thought were going to get grouped out of here. That was sort of the consensus opinion based on a few people that posted on Twitter, but they end up in 3rd rather than 5th, as a lot of people predicted. Of course, I thought M80 was going to be in like 2nd, but oh well. Liquid versus, or no, I'm skipping a little bit ahead. W7M versus Liquid, and this is a pretty classic showdown, but I think W7M's sort of had their number for a bit now. They absolutely dismantled them in the Copenhagen final, and it's a close second map at least, but the other 2 maps are not close at all. M80 versus Bleed, another victory for Bleed, and this puts M80 in the position where in their very final game, which is going to be against Team Liquid, they have to win 2-0 if they want to advance. As soon as they lose 1 map, they're done. Had they not won 1 map versus Bleed, they would have already been out. So they kept themselves alive here, but no, they failed to advance here. They win They win a bunch of rounds in the first half. Of course, they're on defense. That's what happened. And then, so I don't remember if they went up 4-0 and then Liquid won 7 in a row. But I think they won at least 3 in a row. So they lost a lot of rounds after that. I mean, that's the nature of defense, especially, I want to say Clubhouse is one of the more defender-sided maps at the moment. We saw 1 or 2 games where a lot of attacks were won, but, just everything's defender-sided. What are you going to do? I guess fix the meta maybe. Skyscraper 7-5, so no overtime or anything. At this point, I mean, they put up a decent fight on Skyscraper, but you were already eliminated from the tournament. Not much to really play for there, except for Pride or whatever. Virtus Pro versus Bleed. Virtus Pro do take it down. They needed to win. I guess they just needed to win. Didn't matter if it was 2-0 or 2-1 to secure first place, unless the round differential thing is, was relevant. I'm not sure. They win 7-0 on Bank, so I think this is the only other 7-0 besides that FearX beating GK one. And if round differential was important, well, they got a lot of round differential there. And then it looked like Virtus.pro were going to sweep these guys on Clubhouse because they won the first bunch of rounds and they started on attack. They were up like 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, something like that. And then they switched sides. It seemed like the game was going to be over quickly, but Bleed managed to push overtime, and then we trade a few rounds, and yeah, Virtus.pro does come out on top. Pretty exciting end to the group stage. This was the last game going on to conclude the group stage, and it goes to the very final round, and it had implications. Had Bleed won this, they would have stayed in the upper bracket. Had Virtus.pro not won this, they wouldn't have gotten the first round bye. That would have gone to W7M instead, so a lot of implications there. And then finally, let's look at Group D, and then we'll call it a day. I think probably the weakest group. It looked like it before it was actually played, and now it still looked like this after it was played. We started out with Los versus Falcons, and oh, I guess we do have another 7-0. I didn't realize there was a third one. A bunch of stand-ins on this one, though. There were, I guess 2 stand-ins here, and then they got most of their players back, but they never got Joker back on the roster, so that's really unfortunate. But I guess if you were gonna have subs, maybe you'd rather have them against like Los and Sonics than against the other teams. If you were assuming you were gonna lose anyways, maybe you thought you could beat them with the full roster, whatever the case. Unfortunate one way or another. Sonics take down Scars, and it's a close border and even closer Chalet. Sonics take on Los. It's also a 2-0. This looked like Los were going to take Skyscraper. They were up, I want to say like 6-4 or something, and then Sonics battled back to a round 15 victory, and they win on Cafe as well. That was probably the big decider for the group in a lot of people's minds. If Sonics beat Los, they were probably going to top the group, and vice versa. Fury versus Falcons. Close Nighthaven Labs, not close Chalet, and then a close border, and Fury take it down. And yeah, I think Fury surprised a lot of people. I had Fury at 4th place. I didn't think they were going to get eliminated, but I also certainly didn't think they were going to be above Los by any means. And we have Scars versus Fury, and these were probably the bottom 2 teams in a lot of people's opinions before things actually kicked off. And it looked like probably Scars were going to win this after 2 maps because it was a close Skyscraper, but then it was a destruction on Nighthaven Labs, but then Fury managed to pull it out. And I guess actually Scars even won more rounds. They won 18 rounds, whereas these guys only won 16 rounds, but it's not about rounds won, it's about maps won. Sonics versus Falcons, absolute destruction, 7-3, 7-2, not close at all. Sonics got pushed to overtime once and twice, not here, and yeah, so I guess 2 maps of the 8 played, they got pushed to overtime and didn't lose any maps, so not as impressive as G2, but still pretty good showing by them overall. We just looked at that. Los versus Scars, Los lose the first map, then they win the next 2. I was getting this confused with another match for a second. So Scars do get one. Los looking pretty shaky. They were obviously the major runners-up at the most recent major, but they get 2-0'd by Sonics. They get the good one on Falcons, I guess, but Falcons with a bunch of subs. They lose a map to Scars. They lose the series to Fury 2-0. So it doesn't look like probably these guys are going to go super far in bracket, but we'll see. Maybe they bounce back. Maybe they weren't ready for some of this stuff, whatever the case. And here we are, 7-3, 7-3 beat down. 7-5, 7-4, slightly less of a beatdown, but I'd still classify it as one. And then 7-2, 7-4 for the final one we're looking at, and yeah, not close at all. This was the other one that was going on while this one was going on, the Bleed Virtus.pro game, but it ended earlier, and had it gone map 3, I guess it would have gone longer, but because Fury smashed these guys, it went another way. I think Los won the first 2 rounds on Oregon, and then Fury won 7 in a row, and then I think they won the first round in Nighthaven Labs, and then, well, they won 6 of the next 8. So absolute destruction. One of the biggest beatdowns was, and this was probably one of the bigger upsets, maybe not at the point that it happened, but coming into the event. Okay, so it isn't on Liquipedia yet, but they did put out the bracket. So I'm assuming the way it works is like Wolves and W7M, the loser of this, will go down to fight Bleed. And usually what they do in brackets is it'll then be switched for the next one, the loser of G2 versus whoever is going to go down here instead of here, but I don't know that for sure. So we're just going to talk about the match we have here, and then maybe I'll talk about the second round or whatever, lower bracket round 1 and upper bracket round 2. So Wolves versus W7M, maybe we'll see a little bit more of that spunk we saw from Wolves early on in the group stage. They did get taken down a peg by FaZe in their final game, and now we have W7M, perhaps even the evolved form of FaZe, you might say. I would anticipate this to be a W7M win. Maybe it'll be close, but maybe it won't be close. And then W7M versus G2, that's already a rematch of the SI 2023 Grand Final, and they also played each other in, Atlanta semis, and W7M won in Atlanta, and they won the whole event in Atlanta, and G2 won when they played in SI last year in the Grand Final. So that'll be a good one. I guess we'll have to see how W7M's playing, but at the moment, I feel like G2 looks like the best team in the event. NiP versus Fury. I mean, that one's tough to call because NiP got off to a rough start, and that was against two pretty solid teams, but Fury is sort of looking like a solid team in their own right. You might argue that they had a much weaker group, and maybe you think it wasn't much weaker, but maybe just a little bit weaker. Whatever the case, I think I'm going to call the upset. I'm going to go with a Fury pick here. I don't know, maybe it's not right. NiP does get the hometown buff, but the crowd doesn't come into effect until somewhere over here. It's like the top 6 or something where there's actually a crowd, so they won't have that advantage. They're going to have pretty much the same advantage they've had for the whole event, and it didn't look like it paid out that much for them. And they are on an upward trajectory, but I guess sort of so is Fury. I'll give it to Fury. And then whichever one advances, I'm going to go with Sonics. I feel like Sonics are definitely going to be tested a lot more in the bracket here than they were in their group, but I still feel like Sonics look pretty solid. We'll see how that one plays out, but I'd go with Sonics there. And then we have Liquid versus Dark Zero. I don't know. I think probably either this one or this one look like the best match of this first round. Probably this one. More high profile orgs, and then I think maybe a little bit more evenly matched. I guess I'll go Dark Zero here. Liquid have a lot to prove. I mean, if they ever want to win an SI, it is the one in Brazil. And Dark Zero, not shaky necessarily. They did take the loss versus G2, who look really good, and maybe they needed to take a loss to really solidify themselves. I guess I'll go with Dark Zero. Maybe that's bias. Liquid didn't look amazing by any means in their group though, so I think it's not too hard to pick Dark Zero. And then Winner versus Virtus Pro, that's a tough one. I guess I'll go, and I'm assuming Dark Zero here based on my pick. This also looks like a banger matchup. I guess I'll go Virtus Pro. And then FaZe versus Los. So we might actually have Space Station versus FaZe again, like we just saw in Atlanta and like we just saw in the groups if FaZe win. And I think they're going to be my pick. Los looked a little bit lukewarm, although that's another rematch from Atlanta, right? Didn't Los kind of smoked FaZe? I feel like they won't smoke them again. They might beat them, but I'm gonna go with FaZe on the pick there. And then yeah, I'll go with SSG, I guess. So I'm just actually going with all the first seeds, but it is what it is. There's a reason they are the first seeds. And so if it seeds the way I anticipate, then we'll have Wolves versus Bleed, and I don't know, I guess I'll go with Wolves. Bleed are, I mean, they're looking like one of the best APAC teams of all time. Not that that's saying a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but they don't look like slouches in general. They look like they can hang with a lot of good teams, and maybe Wolves are about to spiral out of control, not in a good way for them. I mean, I don't know why that would be good anyways, but I guess I'll go with Wolves, but I could definitely see Bleed taking it. Maybe I'm even cowardly for not going the Bleed route. Bliss versus NiP, I guess in this case. Do I think NiP are just going to stumble versus two APAC teams back to back? Probably not. I think NiP have generally been pretty good in the lower bracket in the past. Back in, I guess, all the way back in 2020, they made a bit of a lower bracket run all the way to the grand final where they lost to SSG. I guess I'll go with NiP. Bliss have been a bit of chokers, and I guess historically NiP are a little bit of chokers as well. But I'll go with NiP there. Then we have Falcons versus Liquid. I don't think I would pick Falcons versus like anybody at this point. They just sort of barely scraped their way in, and they're not playing with their full roster and all this stuff. I'm going to go with Liquid there. And then FearX versus Los. I'm also not going to pick FearX versus anybody. They beat a very pathetic looking GK to get here, and just sort of, I guess not by the skin of their teeth because they won that fairly convincingly, but definitely not going to predict them, so we'll go with Los. So I guess my picks are W7M, Fury, Dark Zero, FaZe, and then over here it is G2, Sonics, Virtus Pro, SSG, and then I have Wolves, NiP, Liquid, and Los. Yeah, so I'm not predicting any of these guys to advance, which is maybe a little bit harsh, but again, it is what it is. There's a reason all these teams are in their current positions, but I also anticipate, there's no way I'm going to get all 12 of these right. I mean, I guess it's possible, but it's pretty unlikely. On game day, we'll just have to see what happens. I'm excited to see what will happen. I hope you guys are as well, and I will catch you guys next time.